for me, it's a case of health and fitness in general is.
So welcome to the show, George Hamblin.
Thank you very much. Nice to speak again.
So what was the thing that got you into fitness?
Um, Good question. Originally, obviously, growing up, I was always on the bigger side, so I was quite overweight and just liked food more than exercising, I suppose. I didn't really have that balance when I was younger. So again, quite overweight. Didn't really do much sport. Didn't really do any form of training. Um, and obviously discovered the gym going forward. So I went to college. Did a year of sport coaching. So again, plenty of sport, plenty of football. And then moving forward, went into a level 2 and 3 personal training course. And then that was obviously how I discovered the whole calorie deficit kind of thing and how I got myself into a better position, lost, say, 15 kilos, which is, quite a lot. As you would know yourself, it takes a little while to get yourself down. Um, but yeah, kind of just discovered a healthier lifestyle and went from there, really.
Was it through your own weight loss with the calorie deficit and just being that kid who did not train and just was overweight? Did you want to teach that to other people? Is that what inspired you to become? Okay.
Yeah, 100%. Seeing the benefits and feeling the benefits and having that much energy and being able to be mobile and be, stronger and just better in overall health, like seeing how that impacted me and just the general, like the emotional side of things of just how much happier you are. I feel like that for a lot of people, when you ask someone what do they want out of the gym, usually it's a case of they either want to feel better, look better, or maybe even move better, depending on what they do. And I would say the biggest one for the majority of my clients is they want to feel better, and typically that links into how they look. So that was certainly a case for myself, where being that bigger person, it's not always that comfortable. And when you do lose that much weight, as you would know, you just feel alive as such.
What do you mean by feel alive as such?
Well, like I said, you've got so much more energy, and you can simply just move better. I also find it comes into like a social setting, like you're almost more socially acceptable in terms of people look at you a lot differently.
I know what you mean because when I lost my weight, the contrast of how I was treated when I was at my, I won't say lowest, just in
Yeah.
life in general, or like the weight was a contributor compared to now is, would you say it's fair to say that you don't want to go back? And this is something I find as well because the other side's just too good.
Yeah. I'm ever since I've lost all of that weight, I've almost like in terms of how high the gym is up on my priority list, I would say it's not that high simply because I know that the process I would have to go to, go and build a load more muscle, it would be a case of I'd have to get myself in those uncomfortable, you know, weight positions and those weight frames. And to me, being, 74 kilos now, maybe 70 at my lightest, if I was to ever go back up to maybe 85 towards 90 kilos, that to me, would be uncomfortable. So I probably wouldn't want to put myself in that position just because of how it would make me feel. Maybe.
I mean, you could always do it as a bulk.
Yeah. Likewise, like I could go up very, very slowly until I felt, I was comfortable and then come back down. But again, the real gains come from making it last as long as possible, going up, in increments. Again, like I spoke to you, we're looking at maybe a kilo to 2 kilos a month, and it is a very, very slow process. However, getting up to, like I said, if I was to touch on, I've maybe been up to 82 before, and even then I started to get a little bit like didn't quite feel as satisfied as I did say now when I'm back down to the low 70s.
Why is that for you, where you prefer to be in that 70 range, essentially lean, muscular, but like very lean in terms of muscle mass, as opposed to being in the 80s, but you've got more muscle on you?
Yeah, that's fair to say. But I would typically say it aids me more because where I do play a fair bit of sport and I do like to run, being that little bit lighter on my feet again makes me quicker, makes me able to run for longer. My endurance is slightly better. I don't have to carry those extra kilos essentially. Um, And probably the most important bit would be, again, it makes me feel a bit better because then I like the way that I look, I like the way that I feel, I like the way that I move. And again, my training overall just feels a lot better because I don't feel sluggish. I don't feel, just that extra bit of weight, I suppose.
So how would you take what you've learned from fitness and from your training and your own personal journey, and how do you apply it to those who you coach?
Not being so harsh on yourself where like we have with you, having those days where you do go out and treat yourself to those occasions, you do go out for a few drinks, you have this really nice meal that you've been, waiting to try this new restaurant, or you go for a family occasion, birthdays, whatever it may be. There are always going to be times in your life where you are going to have to treat yourself, or you don't want to feel left out, or you don't want to go to these places and be, oh, well, I can't do this, or I can't do this, simply because there's targets you need to hit. However, when you do have someone that can guide you around that, like we have done with you, where you have had these days, and like we said, you do maybe double your calories in some situations, having that guidance and accountability and being able to say, look, well, I've done this, how can I fix it? Or what's the best way to mitigate any damage, that could postpone my progress? Um, and like I said, that extra 2,000 calories, realistically, we can change within 3 or 4 days, and then it's almost like nothing ever happened.
With yeah, you're right. I do sometimes go a bit stupid with it and work. Just go,
But
normal, normal, normal. But one thing I like to do is if I'm gonna go over my calories anyway, so as of recording, it's my birthday coming up, so inevitably they're gonna go down the toilet that day, but then that's a special occasion, or I have to accomplish something, whether it's fitness or something else, before I then go and blow the calories. So yeah, I'm gonna blow the calories, but I've earned the right to do it because I've accomplished something I've been working towards anyway. So
absolutely. So
yeah,
I would say that if you do have something coming up, maybe, a couple months prior or a few weeks prior, like you said, you set yourself this goal where, what can I do that's better than something before? And then all of a sudden you've got this reward that you can, use. And then you get that satisfaction. Oh, I've also hit a goal. And now I can also allow myself to not feel guilty in these situations where I do actually want to go and have this, meal with other people. And like you said, your birthday, so you're going to go out and calories aren't going to be at the front of your mind. And that is, to me, what makes coaching so much more enjoyable, because you don't have to hound clients into saying no, like, this is the plan, you're only going to do X, Y, and Z, when in reality, to me, it's what works best is what's most sustainable and what's most enjoyable. And if you have that, then typically what I found is clients are easier to retain because they actually enjoy what they're doing and it doesn't necessarily feel like a chore.
have you ever met any other coaches who do that? So it's like, no, 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 no. It's I don't care. It's Christmas. You've got to stick to this meal plan. You've got to stick to these calories. I'm thinking, going out loud, like, okay, I get people blow their diets during Christmas, but it's, and yes, I know it's just gone as of this episode releasing, but you get my point now. It's like a once a year thing. And let's be honest, who here is going to really think about their calories on Christmas Day?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it depends on, the coach's point of view on how serious maybe a client may take it, because I do have clients where, like I said with you, I'm a little bit more lenient in terms of you are going to have these days. However, if I was to have a client that's, wants to get to their goal as quick as possible, then obviously it would make sense to direct them in the sense of, okay, well, here is X, Y, and Z. If you do go out of these, out of these boundaries, that will hinder and that will slow down your progress. But again, if you have a client that's willing to do that, then there's a good chance that they would understand that is what would happen. So again, I do think it totally depends on the coach and on the client. And there are coaches out there that are quite strict, but then I suppose if you get to know your coach before you hire them, I suppose, then there's a good chance you'll know whether it's the right kind of person you want to have by your side almost. Um, so again, you kind of want to find the person that's really suited to you or who understands your, say, personality.
What would you say is typically the goals that people tend to come to you for? So with me, it was weight loss and building muscle and getting good with the gym and some of the techniques. Because I remember my last gym, the response with my deadlifts like, yeah, you can deadlift if you fuck up the technique. But then do you have someone who's a bit more running orientated or someone who's purely they don't care about aesthetics, they just literally want to lift as heavy weight as possible because solid.
Yeah, I've had a variety of all sorts of clients. I've had a few where they go into some form of like SBD training. So obviously your squat, your bench, and your deadlift. So your free, compound, your bigger lifts where people may go and compete. So I've had a few like that, and the majority of the time, the first thing I will do with a lot of clients is, try and get them down in terms of weight so that they have a better starting position. So even if they do want it to, go and put on all of this muscle, realistically, the best way to do it is to almost strip yourself down, until you're comfortable in terms of body fat percentage. And if you can do that, then all of a sudden, that gaining phase and building muscle and putting on weight, you can go a lot further. Your body fat percentage isn't going to increase as high as it would have before if you just started from, the very beginning where they were already at. So in hindsight, I would say your best bet is to come down first. And like we have with you, we've come down, we lost roughly,
Nine,
what
it
was
was
it?
95, wasn't it? And then
Yeah, all the way down
when we
to
stopped that,
78.
yeah, it was 78.
Yeah, so that is what, 17, 18 kilos roughly.
17
So
would be 77 if it was 18.
absolutely. So now we're in a much better position. So we can go up and we can, take it a little bit slower and be patient with it. Do the whole 1 kilo to 2 kilo average a month. And then by the time we've gained 10 kilos, you'll be in a much better position. You'll have that bigger muscle mass and not as big of fat, body fat percentage. So then you don't have to worry about going up, coming back down, going up, coming back down within those 10 months as much as you would, you know, if you were to start at a higher body fat percentage. Because ideally, you don't really want to be touching on 25, 30% body fat or even higher for some people, simply because, again, is that the most comfortable? Is that the most optimal? Is that going to make you feel really good? Probably not. And in terms of health, it simply just isn't the best thing to do.
I know you've got to be really careful, even if you're bulking, when it comes to body weight, because I know if you overdo it with your muscles, you can actually shorten your lifespan because of how much. I don't know the exact science, but I know they put a lot of pressure on your body to the point where if you have too much muscle mass, it can actually shorten your lifespan a bit too long. I remember something, I think you might have, I've mentioned him to you before. I know you don't know him, but Alex Hormozi said, entrepreneur America, who's massive, but he said he actually lost a ton of muscle mass simply because he put too much on, and that would shorten his lifespan. And he actually wanted to live for longer than his muscles would allow, so he had to lose a bunch of muscle mass just to basically stay alive.
I mean, I would certainly say that that would be the case if you were to do it with your body fat percentage. But in terms of like muscle mass, I feel your average person will never be in that position unless you were to involve steroids and gear usage. Your average person, really, like your average lifter, will never get to the position where they've got too much muscle mass, because to build that much muscle mass takes an incredibly long time. And the further you get down the spectrum or along the spectrum, it's all of these minute details. If they are not perfect, so your sleep, your hydration, your food and your calories, your protein intake, all of these things obviously all combine. And the further you get down the line, the more these things matter. So even if you've been lifting for 15, 20 years consecutively, you aren't ever going to be in a position where you've got too much muscle mass. Unless, like I said, you are on these PEDs and these performance enhancing drugs, simply because your body just isn't built to respond that quickly.
What is your opinion on steroids? I know we've had this conversation in private, but personally, I think it makes sense as you get older because you're naturally going to lose energy and you're naturally going to lose more muscle mass. And if you want to keep it at that point, you do. I think it's stupid if you do in your 20s. Depending on your personal situation, 30s, like if you're one of those people who will drop off energy and muscle mass very quickly in your 30s and you want to keep it fair enough, if you can leave it for a long time, do? Because I know that would kill your testosterone as a guy. I have no idea the effects on women besides a deeper voice.
That is
That's
one
what
of
I've heard.
them. But I mean, my view on my view on PEDs really aren't that strong. To me, it's more of a preference in terms of again how high up on the priority list is your training. Like, are you doing it simply for pleasure? Are you doing it for personal gain? Are you doing it for longevity? Or again, are you doing it to probably look a bit better? The majority of people, maybe. Or are you going to bodybuild? Are you going to, go on one of these shows and get on stage? Again, everyone's got their own reasons. I mean, I've never been an advocate for it. However, like you said, as you get older, your testosterone naturally will decline, your energy levels will decline. So to me, it's a case of health and fitness in general is building longevity. And if you do get to this point where you are in your 30s or your 40s and you care that much about your health and you care that much about training, it's still one of your biggest hobbies. Then to me, I don't see any harm in it because it's one of your hobbies that you've kind of put so much time and effort into. And that effect that it may have if you were just to have this steady decline as such, without using any form of PEDs, as you get older, you probably will become less mobile, a little bit weaker, a little bit slower. So, depending on how much that impacts your life, I would say determines the outcome of whether or not you would probably use PEDs. Um, for me, if I was to ever do it, it probably would be later on down the line, and it would be something that I would document, and it would also be something that I would like to see the impact in terms of how much muscle mass I would gain in a certain amount of time, because the amount of people that do PEDs, however, don't really know the effects and what it's kind of doing to their body. The majority of people kind of are in that position and they're just doing it for the sake of, I want to get bigger, I want to get stronger, which is fair enough. However, I do feel like if you are going to do it, you should definitely do it with a coach. For starters, you should definitely do your blood work, so kind of monitor how your body's reacting to it all, which is something that I do think people that use PEDs neglect quite a lot. Um, and another thing would just be to, again, probably document it and see what kind of lifestyle changes you're getting from these PEDs in general.
I would also say if you want kids, have the kids before you go on them. Like I said, it kills your testosterone.
Yeah, to some extent, but then you can fix that and it will fix itself. So you can do something like a PCT, which is like a post course treatment. Um, Kind of just brings your testosterone levels back up just a little bit quicker than what it would naturally. Um, the link between fertility and testosterone usage, if you were to say inject testosterone, doesn't really correspond too well, because you've got to think of all of these bodybuilders or athletes, that have used them. So Chris Bumstead, for example, who's just won his sixth, championship in terms of bodybuilding, has had a kid along the way. So I just as one example, I don't typically see how it would make you infertile. Not to say that I could be totally wrong, but at the same time, there are multiple people out there who have managed to have children, yet are also running cycles, through the year and have done for probably 10 years.
I'm just thinking of it more as a precaution thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, a lot of people, if they are going to do it, there's a good chance they would probably have children first, and then, like you said, when you get into your 30s and your 40s and your 50s, maybe as you get a little bit slower, a little bit weaker, and a little bit immobile, probably your best time to do it would be then.
Which exercises would you start someone off with who's never been to the gym before? So I'm not talking when me and you started working together. I had been, it just I needed some help actually, doing it properly and all that. No, no. Let's say this person comes in fresh off a block, but they've never even lifted a dumbbell before or something.
I mean, typically, with the majority of people, I would do some form of movement assessment with. So if I bring a client on board, my first session typically nowadays would be, okay, so let's have a look at your four primary movements. So you're looking at your squat, your hinge, your push, and your pull. So I'd probably spend a good 10, 15 minutes looking at a squat, seeing how they perform it. Okay, well, how come this is happening? How can we change it? How can we make it a little bit better? Again, do it with your hinge, so your RDLs, your stiff legs, and then you push and you pull. Typically, if they have a good idea or a good understanding or a good performance level of these, then obviously it would be a case of, okay, well, let's look at some progressions. How are you getting on? And then again, from there on out, it would be a case of numbers, really, in terms of what they want to get out of the gym. Um, and in your situation, it was a case of, okay, we're going to try and get stronger, but also at the same time, can we look at bringing your weight down? And I would say a good 60, 70% of first time gym goers are in a very similar situation.
60 to 70%?
You'd be surprised in terms of like what a lot of people want out of the gym when they first start. And I would say most of the time, it's a case of they probably want to lose weight first. They just maybe don't know how. And then the other side of the spectrum is that maybe they've been a little bit lighter and they've never really known how to build muscle, maybe. But typically, those are your two kind of starting points that people, you know, begin at the gym with.
I would also argue with that is a lack of knowledge and information because we've had
Yeah.
you remember my blowout that one time where I had 1,200 calories, but it was a small bag of nuts?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that's my
In the
point though.
first few
Most people
weeks.
wouldn't know. I had a coworker the other day, we were talking about 600, he was asking how much is 600 calories, and I was giving him all these examples, and I used like half a bag of nuts, a couple of slices of pizza, like there's frozen bags I like to eat. Guilty pleasures charged. But that's my point. Most people wouldn't know, and let's be honest, it's a bit more obvious in the US as they put calories and they stick it loud and clear. But in the UK, it's like the small print, isn't it? So it's like calories 200, maybe not calories 600 in the bin with
Yeah.
you.
But then again, I would advise that everyone in general, and I would advise it for literally everyone, is to have an understanding of what their intake is and what their expenditure is. Because if you're in a position where you feel a little bit uncomfortable with your weight and maybe you want to put some on or you want to, take some off, there is only one way to do it, and that is by managing your intake and having a rough idea of what your expenditure is. So, some people who may have a desk job and they don't go to the gym, they don't have any hobbies or sports. You are, for some people, obviously differences between absolutely everyone. But some people may have an expenditure, a calorie expenditure of like 1,400, 1,500 calories. And I've coached people, typically smaller females. So when I was in Australia, one of my clients, for example, was weighing around 50 kilos, wasn't very tall. You're kind of looking at like 4'10", 4'11". And for someone like that, their expenditure off the bat is so low, and it's 1,400 calories, 1,500 calories. So it's like if they want to lose weight, for them it's so much more difficult, and you have to find ways to improve that improve that expenditure and just bring it up as much as you can. That way, they can still have an enjoyable, healthy diet as such. So anything below 1,500 calories, for me, I wouldn't recommend at all for anyone. So to begin with, if that is the case and you are looking at like a 1,500 calorie expenditure, I wouldn't be looking to minimize any more food. From there on out, I would be okay. Well, simply let's get moving a little bit more. Can we, go to the gym twice, 3 times, 4 times a week? If so, brilliant. Can we get your step count up? Can we look at 8,000 daily? Can we look at 50,000 on average per week? Again, even that, you're looking at maybe 1,500 calories extra sporadic through the week, and that alone can change everything, especially for someone that is a little bit smaller and a little bit lighter. And typically, that does happen to females.
I personally say you can eat as much as you like, as long as you can burn it all off.
Yeah, again, like if you are, you know, increasing your calories, you are taking back all of this food. If your goal is to lose weight, then you kind of do need a outcome, or you do need a way of, again, increasing your expenditure and finding a way to make sure that one number is higher or one number is lower than the other. Because that's simply the only way forward, really.
Because I remember when I worked in the warehouse, yes, my weight did come down, but I was you remember that I was eating just under 4,000 calories. But here's the thing, I was burning more than I was eating. That's why my weight went down because I was moving
Yeah.
around
So
in the cold for 8 and 7, well, not counting the break. I'll count the break 8 hours a day.
yeah, and you were in quite a fortunate position where you were doing 20,000 steps a day. And, for a lot of people, that's, very, very unlikely. So you are giving yourself that extra bit of wiggle room where even if you do go and eat 4,000 calories, it probably isn't happening every day. But if you do, the damage is mitigated simply because your expenditure on average is so much higher than like your average person.
What is the most absurd amount of calories you've seen someone eat because they had to, but their expenditure covered it? So, yeah, so I had this example, take it with a grain of salt. There was no, he claimed it, but shows no proof that he was eating 10,000 calories, but because he was a swimmer, he could basically do that.
Yeah, I mean, not that I've coached anyone that's ran marathons or ultraman, like all of those extremist sports where you are literally looking at expenditures of 10,000 calories. Like, I've trained for a couple half marathons and I'm currently training for a marathon. And I know that on my days where I do run, they are typically longer runs. So my expenditure may touch on 5,000 calories one day. So to me, I have to get that fuel back into my system. I have to get those carbs back in, bring my energy stores back up. Like, otherwise, it simply is going to slow down my recovery. I'm not going to be able to perform the next day in the gym, or better yet, I may not even be able to run, within the next 2 days. And when your training is that intense, you simply have no other option but to keep eating. And you'll probably realize if you ever go into any of those sort of situations where you're burning that many calories, your hunger will simply go insane and you will want to eat it. So for those people that may struggle with eating a little bit more, I would probably say go in, do something really intense, and see how your hunger and your appetite feels after that. Otherwise, you know, if you are training and it's maybe not as difficult as it should be or could be, you're probably not gonna be able to fulfill yourself with all of this food to make you gain that extra bit of muscle.
I also think as well, it's also can you sustain it over the long term? Because there was this, I only seen parts of this video, but there was this one guy, there's an old, I think it was a British, yeah, it was British show where they would go and see families who were, well, couples particularly, who were overweight, but they will see what they were eating. There was this one guy who apparently ate ridiculous amounts, but the thing was he was an ex-marathon runner, but he just hadn't thought to change his diet because he can't do it anymore, basically. He's got to that point in life. But it never occurred to him to go, I can't do this anymore, so I've got to stop eating like I can.
Yeah. So obviously, for someone like that, he's probably gone through years or at least months of training, all of this hard work, where again, his basic maintenance for his calories probably would have been triple your average, person's. So he's been so used to eating all of this food and not necessarily putting on any weight simply because of how much he was moving.
It's easily done, isn't it?
Absolutely.
What would you say are your favorite personal exercises in the gym? And of those exercises, which ones do you like to teach your clients or get your clients to do?
Personal favorites. Um, at the minute, going back into deadlifting, like I always used to love it. As much as I know that the reward isn't quite there in terms of building muscle, I know that. However, it's a movement where I enjoy it. So to me, it's like if I've got movements that I enjoy and I want to go to the gym. If I had a session where I didn't really enjoy any of those movements, probably wouldn't stick to it and I wouldn't want to keep going to the gym because I don't look forward to it. Whereas now I've started to deadlift a little bit more. I know, like I said, the rewards aren't necessarily there, but it's enjoyable for me. I feel like every person likes picking up heavy weight realistically. And, for a lot of people, that does please them. So for me at the minute, I would say deadlift is definitely up there simply because it's one of my bigger movements, my stronger movements. Um, And again, probably barbell back squat, again, just a heavier movement, moving a lot of weight. They're difficult. Again, they burn a lot of calories. So to me, it makes my sessions a lot more enjoyable. I'm training hard, I'm moving, efficiently. Um, and then in my other top three, I would probably say like a dumbbell press, again, simply because it's one of my stronger movements, like a dumbbell chest press. Um, and again, it's something I look forward to doing.
Which ones are your least favorite exercises then?
Least favorites.
Yeah, so I know that it doesn't have to be enjoyable, but I know there's one where I don't know what it's called, but it's where they just pick up the weight and then slam it down, pick it up, drop it along those. I don't know what they're called. I know you don't like that
Yeah.
one because you said to me
Uh,
it's completely pointless.
yeah. So you're talking about rack pulls. Rack pulls in general, like the top end of say like a deadlift movement. To me, there are no real benefits to it. I don't think deadlifts are massively far off them, but the range of motion is completely minimal. So you aren't really putting any muscle through any form of contraction. Um, and the toll that lifting an absurd amount of weight has on your body, even if it is for a certain short range of motion, there's no real benefit to it. And like I said, the fatigue that it may put on your body, to me, is outweighs everything else that it can possibly give you in terms of benefits.
What are some of the other exercises that you don't like? Because I use that one as an example.
Yeah, that one's certainly the worst. Um, I mean, it varies because I wouldn't say that I dislike any movements really. It's my argument is typically which one's more efficient, which one's more suited to each client or each person. So to me, it's more of an argument of what makes more sense to do. So there are probably my favorite exercises that I like to program for clients. However, for some it may vary, it may be different, but typically to me, all that really matters is what am I going to get the most out of when I go and perform it, and what gives me the most benefit.
Here's a question for you. Which exercises do you personally do that you wouldn't teach to any of your clients, and why?
Unless their goal was to deadlift, unless their goal was to do some form of powerlifting, I very, very, very rarely, I think I've maybe only ever had two or three clients where I've gone through deadlifting with them. So I had this guy called Spencer in Sydney when I was coaching, and his goal is to go and do some powerlifting events just for fun, not necessarily to win anything massive, but just simply out of the enjoyment of competing and doing really well and lifting heavy weights. If their goal wasn't that, I wouldn't put that in some form of programming simply because of the benefits, the minimal benefits that it would give in terms of the fatigue and the toll that it would put on your body.
You mentioned about Spencer being in Australia and you've coached in Australia. What have been the more what have been the noticeable differences between coaching in Australia and the UK? Like the mindset, how people approach their fitness, all that sort of stuff.
There's certainly more of a drive and ambition, and it's definitely something that people in Australia care more about. So here, I would like to say in Australia, people are again probably in better shape, the majority, especially those that do go to the gym because they care more about it. But then it also links to the point that there's beaches everywhere, especially obviously where I stayed in Sydney for so long. There were beaches everywhere. You got to think people are constantly out and about. It's hot weather. People have their body out, and people are constantly comparing themselves to others. And this guy looks really good, or this person looks really good. And then there's that domino effect of okay, well now I need to kind of maybe get my act together. I need to go and train a little bit harder. I need to go and join one of these absurd 4:30 run clubs in the morning. And there's all of these influences for it, and you've got all of these outside gyms, and like I said, all of these run clubs, and everything happens all the time and it's everywhere and fitness is all around you. Whereas here, there is a big lack of, that drive and ambition for being a little bit healthier and being a little bit more active.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So it's the environment that's facilitating. Because this was when I was 21. I was sat in the park, and this is when I was, yeah, this was when I think I was my heaviest because I wasn't even working out or doing anything at the time. Maybe beforehand. I was out in the park, and I was like, no wonder I'm fat. Everyone else around me is either skinny or fat. No one's actually in shape.
Yeah,
Like, and monkey see, monkey do. And at that point, until you actually realize it's very subconscious.
absolutely. And I do think there is just maybe, I think the weather probably plays a large part in it because I feel like even here, if the sun was out, 70% of the time, or if the weather was warmer and people were, going to all of these places and you see a lot more of it, then there would still be that drive and that pressure almost on someone to look a bit better, as much as it is in Australia. So I do think that. And I would also say that income and money is probably another one. So obviously with the wages and the income and, the average take home in Australia being absurdly higher, I would say that plays a big effect on being able to look after yourself a little bit more. So as here, obviously, where the wage may not be, the cost of living crisis, everything like that going on, people don't necessarily prioritize their health or prioritize fitness simply because, they have other things to pay for. And I would probably say that living, living in your house and having your food and supplying all of this for your family, that to them is going to be more important because the gym's not necessarily, in the picture for a lot of people.
Also, I've been finding this and I'm having to do a lot of budget bulking personally because yeah, I live on my own, have to, and yeah, I've got to find a way around it. But then I don't get the luxury of going having salmon every single day. I have don't get me wrong, I like what I eat, minus dinner, but but yeah, it's just what you've got to find a way around it, and then what's the alternative? I also
Yeah,
think it might be clothing as well. Now, hear me out. I said this to my counselor years ago when I had it, and I said to him, this wasn't off. At the time, I just kind of said it, but looking back, it had a lot more significance than it did. I've still got the hoodie where it was this really baggy one, where it like really over my stomach. But I said to him, I like wearing hoodies because it hides my stomach. And because it's always cold and typically wet and windy in the
absolutely.
UK, well, what are most people going to wear? Hoodies, coats, and that, and it just hides their body. I mean, how many people do you see walking around in stuff like this? I forget the collar, just t-shirt.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I do feel like the weather certainly plays a big role into it, simply because there's no real need to be topless or go to these places. Like even if you go to the beach, it's not necessarily that warm. So unless we have a peak summer of 30 degrees and you have these days where you are constantly just sweating and sweating and sweating because it's so warm, there's no real need to be topless. Whereas, like I said, over there, where it's constantly that warm, the UV is a lot higher. The temperature is simply just abnormal. People over there obviously have much more reason to be topless, and like I said, that you seeing a lot of people in good shape is always gonna have that domino effect of okay, well maybe I should, go and do a little bit more.
Let's say I was to assign you the task of getting everyone in the country into shape, or at least a good 80% of them. How would you go about it, making it to get people in shape in the UK?
I mean, firstly, I feel you kind of need to figure out the variables in terms of, like I said earlier, having a way to find out roughly what your expenditure is. So, you're looking at your height, your weight, what kind of job you've got, whether it's sedentary, whether you're moving a lot. So, obviously, where you were doing 20,000 steps, or some people maybe, sat in an office. Those big roles obviously impact your expenditure either dramatically or not at all. And then okay, so do you have any sports? Do you have any hobbies? Do you go to the gym? Do you train two, three, 4 times a week? Like, if you can add up all of these things, then you get an average. That for me is my first step. Because if you don't have that, then, you know, you may go and be sedentary at an office. You may not do all of this movement, but you're still eating what you seem to think is, normal, and what most people do think is your average kind of day of eating. Yet, what you don't know is, okay, well, that is roughly 2,500 calories. The guidelines being 2,000 for a female, 2,000 for 500 for a male, and that's not always the case. And if you're just going to stick to that, but you don't know what your expenditure is, how do you know whether you're going to put on weight or lose weight? So there's always going to be that spectrum of, you kind of need to find these numbers and then find a way to change them, essentially. So, like I said, if you are looking to lose weight, can you increase your expenditure? Can you reduce your intake, your calorie intake? And if you want to go the other way, then can you do the opposite, really?
You can't use me as an example, but which of your clients has been the most successful and why? Like, which one really, like, blew it out the park?
So, someone like Coach currently, who's from Australia, his name's Corey. He started with me, and I think we were touching on maybe 105 to 110 kilos roughly. So again, yeah, but for a male, again, not absurd, because he's 6 foot 3, 6 foot 4, and you have these bigger builds. However, he'd never really had the understanding of the gym, was quite intimidated, simply because he didn't want to look like an idiot, and he didn't want to look like he didn't know what he was doing. And I feel like that goes for a lot of people, because no one wants to embarrass themselves, which is, totally fair enough. And you don't know until you try, realistically. Like, until you put yourself in that environment and you go and try something new, you simply don't know what's going to happen. And for anyone that's trying to learn a new skill, the likelihood that they're very, very good at it from the very beginning, it's the odds are against you from the beginning. So then, what I would say is, who can help you? Are you in a position to have a coach alongside you, even if it was for 12 weeks? Like I said to you, like, if we did 12 weeks of personal training, I'm going to be with you just once a week, and then from there, you learn the foundations and you learn the basics, and you have this big base to build on. And then you kind of just need that accountability. You kind of need that guidance alongside you. You may not necessarily need a PT with you every single session like we do now. It's more of a check it in, how are we getting, how are the sessions going, do you need any assistance with anything? Like, having that alongside you, even though you may know how to train, because even before you hired me as a personal trainer, it was a case of, you thought you were doing all of these things, and the majority of it was right. However, there were a few things that needed to change, or there were a few exercises that could have been done differently, or just different exercises in general. And I feel like until you put yourself through 12 weeks with a coach or a PT, you don't necessarily expose yourself to all of these things that you can learn for, a lifetime of skills, realistically, because that is what it is. And knowing how to track your food, knowing roughly, what you're eating, what you're consuming, you are going to be eating for the rest of your life. So it makes sense to keep yourself in a position where you can actually monitor your weight. And for a lot of people, that's a really important thing.
One last question. What would you say is the most ideal training plan for most people? So for the majority, what would you say people should do?
That depends, I would say, on how much availability they've got. So, for those people that work, your average kind of 9 to 5, do they have time to get in twice a week? If they do, then you're probably looking at two full body sessions, so that you can split that volume adequately across those 2 sessions and still get enough intensity in to, again, increase your expenditure, but also expose yourself to that resistance training, learn these new movements, and then build a bit of muscle. And then again, if they could maybe train 3 times a week, could you look at something like a push pull leg? So something similar to what we're doing, where we alternate 3 times a week and then 4 times a week. Can we look at something like push pull legs? So again, you're looking at your push being your chest, your shoulders, your triceps, your pull being the entirety of your back and your biceps, and then your legs obviously being your whole lower body, being your quads, your hamstrings, your glutes, your calves, etc. Um, if it is 4 times a week and it is consistently 4 times a week, I would probably look at something like an upper lower, upper lower. So again, rotating your movements and your exercises each upper session. So they aren't going to be exactly the same. And then the same with your two lower body sessions. It's more so just about how much ground can you cover in the time frame that you've got realistically. And then for some people that can train every day of the week, not that I would advise it, because I'm quite an advocate for having your rest days, having your time off, letting your body have that downtime that it requires, simply because that's what's going to put you in a better position to perform the next day or perform the week after.
Yeah, there's my personal preferences: gym, rest, gym, rest, gym, rest, and just keep doing that. But if for whatever reason I can't do a gym day, I like to double up the gym days, but then make up the rest days by doubling them up and then just get
Absolutely.
it works so well. I had to do that when I was doing my exam invigilating one because I generally
Yeah.
because I didn't have the time. Well, this is when I was where I was living at the time. Didn't have time to go to the gym, work out, come back. So I would have to double up and then just have the days I was doing the invigilation as a go by train to
Yeah.
have the rest days and then get back on it on the Saturday.
Exactly. And from your experience, that's worked really well, because by the time you've managed to do a push, a pull, and the legs, you've then had 3 rest days and 2 training days before you then go and do push again or pull again or legs again. So you've got that adequate recovery, and you then aren't sore going into your next session. You're not fatigued going into that next session, and you keep your training quite sporadic, simply so that you can perform better the next session.
George Hamblin, everyone. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about your book you for coaching?
Instagram, or yeah, I would say Instagram. Instagram's the best bet. Coached by HB. But yeah, coaching, personal training, everything like that. Any questions? Let me know.
What's up, everyone? If you enjoyed that episode with George Hamblin and you want to learn more about personal fitness and exercise, then I have these two personal trainers, Dylan Beveridge and Justin Klein, right here and here. I'll see you there.